Hello and welcome to this e-learning session. I am Priya Sabnis, Assistant Professor from SRSN College of Arts and Science. I am going to present module number 20. The topic is suicide, clinical picture and causal pattern from unit 2, understanding psychological disorder. Now in this session, what I am going to discuss with you is the clinical picture of suicide, suicide in children, adolescent, and young adults, known risk factors in adolescent suicide, and causal factors in suicide. At the end of the session, what you all are going to learn is to describe the clinical picture in suicide, examine suicide in children, adolescent, and young adults, analyze the known risk factors in adolescent suicide, and summarize the causal factors in suicide. Now, let's start with the topic suicide. Suicide is a significant factor in all types of depression. Around 50 to 90% of people who are suffering from depression are at the risk for suicide. But depression may not be the only cause for suicide. Suicide may also be associated with other mental disorder. According to the studies, risk of suicide is greater in individuals with two or more mental disorders. In Western countries, suicide ranks among 10th leading cause of death. Now, statistics might help us to understand the rates of suicide, but it will not be able to convey us the tragedy of suicide. So, what is the tragedy of suicide? The tragedy of suicide is that many people who commit suicide actually do not want to die, and the long-lasting distress amongst those left behind. Now, coming to the clinical picture in suicide. When we talk about the clinical picture in suicide, we have to understand as who attempts suicide and who commits suicide. With respect to attempted suicide is common in the age group of 18 and 24. In United States, women are more likely to attempt suicide than men, and it usually occurs in the context of interpersonal discord or other severe life stress. With respect to completed suicide on the other hand are less frequent. Women than men actually complete suicide. Here we see gender difference. Highest rates of completed suicide is amongst elderly people. Now, who are these elderly people? Elderly people who are divorced, widow, or suffering from a chronic physical illness. The common method used by women to complete suicide is drug ingestion, whereas men use method that is more likely to be lethal, for example, gunshot. Again, over here we see that there is gender difference in the method used to complete suicide. Then the risk of completed suicide is also found to be high among adults with severe and recurrent mood disorder, antisocial personality, alcohol dependence, borderline personality, and schizophrenia. Finally, the risk of attempted or completed suicide is also found to be high in people living alone, creative people, successful scientists, writers, business people, and artists. Now let's try and understand suicide among children, adolescent, and young adults. Rates of completed suicide among children are increasing. Suicide rates in children below age 10 is extremely rare. Deprivation, troubled background, loss of parents, abuse, depression, antisocial behavior, and high impulsivity are some of the risk factors for suicide among children. Rates of suicide among adolescents are increasing in most and many countries studied. Studies have shown that suicide rates in college students are high, and it is the second leading cause of death in this group. Now, what are the known risk factors for adolescent suicide? The risk factors are mood disorder, conduct disorder, substance use disorder, antidepressant medication, exposure through media, combined stresses of academic demand, social interaction problems, and career choice. Well, now we come to the important part of this topic, that is causes of suicide. Now, when we talk about causes of suicide, we need to take into consideration three different causal factors, that is biological causal factor, psychosocial causal factor, and socio-cultural causal factor. Coming to biological causal factors, there is strong evidence that suicide runs in the family. That means that there is a genetic a factor that plays a role in the risk for suicide. For example, the concordance rate for suicide is among identical twin is found in order to be high in as compared to the fraternal twins. Studies have also shown that this genetic vulnerability is also linked to neurochemical correlate of suicide, wherein victims of suicide have shown reduced serotogenic activity. Studies have also shown association between suicide and short early serotonin transporter gene. Now coming to psychosocial causal factors, what are these factors? One is personality traits like impulsivity, aggression, pessimism, and negative affectivity. Second, negative events such as severe financial reversal, imprisonment, and interpersonal crisis of various sort. Third, symptoms of major depression such as psychic anxiety, panic attack, severe anhedonia, global insomnia, delusions, and alcohol. And fourth is early negative experiences that includes family psychopathology, child maltreatment, and family instability that in turn are associated with the child having low self-esteem, hopelessness, and poor problem-solving skills. Now, this early negative experiences may lead the person to have cognitive deficits, and this cognitive deficits may then link to the risk for suicide. Lastly, we go to the socio-cultural causal factors. In United States, substantial differences are found to occur among different ethnic or racial groups. Suicide rates also vary considerably from one society to another. Countries like Greece, Italy, Spain, and United Kingdoms show low rates of suicide, whereas Hungary has world's highest rate of suicide. Religious taboos with respect to suicide and attitudes of society about death are found to be important determinants of suicide rate. Studies have also shown cross-cultural gender differences in attempted and completed suicide. According to sociologist Emil Durkheim, higher incidences of suicide among individuals occur under conditions of uncertainty and disorganization in the absence of strong group ties. Suicide rates are also found to be higher among groups that are subjected to severe social pressure. For example, in 1932, during Great Depression in United States, rate of suicide had increased. So here we have tried to understand about the clinical picture and the causal pattern of suicide. Now it's time for us to think as what could be the prevention for suicide. Thank you.